Hey guys, tonight we are stepping back into a world of damp stones, smoke-tinged air, and the steady crunch of boots against uneven cobblestones. You find yourself on the wall of a small medieval town, and while the moon offers a silver glow, it's the kind that makes shadows stretch in unsettling ways. The night is colder than you expect, and you can already feel it pressing into your joints. Truth is, you probably wouldn't survive a single week of this, not with the thin rations, suspicious stares, and the drafty lodgings. Still, in this story, you do survive, one step at a time. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like sharing, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's fun to know where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You grip your wooden staff, not exactly a mighty weapon, but enough to nudge away a drunken townsman or prod at a suspicious bundle by the roadside. The air is raw, heavy with smoke from hearth fires that never quite escape the clustered chimneys. A faint mist clings to your eyelashes, and when you breathe, it curls white into the darkness. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks, then stops, as if even it remembers that night belongs to the watch. The soundscape is sparse. Mostly, it's your own breathing, the creak of leather straps, and occasionally the hollow toll of a church bell announcing the passing hour. That bell does more than mark time. It controls it. In fact, bells structured much of medieval life, from signaling prayer to calling workers from fields to alerting the town of fire or invaders. Historians still argue whether townsfolk actually appreciated the constant clanging or merely endured it with the same resigned sigh they gave to muddy streets and steep taxes. You drag your gloved hand along the rough stone of the wall, noting how centuries of touch have smoothed some corners while leaving others sharp. Down below, the alleys are barely lit, just enough to see a stray pig nosing through refuse. Oddly enough, pigs in medieval towns weren't rare intruders. They were regular residents, sometimes wearing small wooden yokes to discourage them from squeezing into gardens. Imagine trying to write your medieval Yelp review after tripping over one in the dark. The night stretches long, and your stomach growls against the silence. You think of the bread waiting at dawn, coarse, a bit sour, but dependable. Occasionally, households tried to lighten the texture by mixing in ground peas or even tree bark during bad harvests. You hope tonight's loaf won't have any extra fiber of that kind. A gust of wind presses against your cloak, carrying the faint tang of smoke and manure. You shift your stance, leaning on the staff, eyes adjusting to the endless gray-blue tones of the night. Somewhere far off, laughter carries from a tavern door swinging shut, reminding you that while most sleep, some still cling to warmth, ale, and noise. You envy them briefly, then let the thought go. Your task is to keep walking, to let others sleep undisturbed. And just so we don't disturb this sleepy rhythm, if you've made it this far, maybe you're already sinking into that calm flow. Feel free to like this video and subscribe right now, so you'll always have more long, uneventful nights to drift off to. The scratch of wool against your neck becomes your most constant companion tonight, and not in the cozy sense. You tug the coarse tunic closer, hoping to trap a little warmth, but it prickles your skin like an overzealous cat kneading your shoulder. Every layer is thick, stiff, and faintly itchy, a patchwork of natural dyes that never quite match. The medieval wardrobe is a masterclass in compromise. You wear what's available, not what's fashionable. Somewhere down the centuries, tailors would perfect the art of comfort. But in your world tonight, You're wrapped in wool spun unevenly, dyed with roots and lichens, and heavy enough that you feel your shoulders sag. The only stylish choice here is whether you'd prefer to freeze or to itch. The cold makes your breath curl in clouds, and you notice how it clings to the inside of your hood. You can almost smell the lanolin still embedded in the fibers of your cloak, the natural grease that makes wool water resistant, but also faintly barnyard in aroma. You wonder whether anyone in this town bothers to wash wool thoroughly, or whether they just accept the smell as another part of daily life. After all, this is the same society that believed changing your underwear too often could invite illness. Historians still argue whether those beliefs came from genuine medical theories of humors or simply from practical shortages of soap and water. Either way, the result is the same. You and everyone around you carry the rustic perfume of the times. Your gloves are stiff leather, more cracked than supple, and every time you flex your fingers, the seams stretch with a warning creak. The chill seeps in anyway, making your hands ache like brittle twigs. You think of modern fleece-lined gloves with wistful longing. But here, your best hope is to rub your palms together and pretend the friction equals comfort. It doesn't. You pass another watchman near the northern tower. He nods at you, his face nearly swallowed by a hood that makes him look like a mobile haystack. His breath steams as he mutters something about the wind shifting east. You both know what that means. Colder still, and maybe even snow by morning. For the record, weather forecasting in your age is less science and more, let's stare at the sky and hope we're right. Still, these men pride themselves on reading clouds and gusts the way you might check a weather app. Quirky as it seems, they're often right enough to prepare the town, though no one ever cancels a fare or postpones a shift because of a few ominous clouds. Life goes on, itchy and shivering. You shift your cloak tighter and resume your slow walk. Each step sends the rough fabric brushing against your knees, a reminder that mobility is not part of the design. The tunic bunches awkwardly where the belt cinches your waist, pressing into you like a poorly adjusted seatbelt. Somewhere in the folds of your clothing, straw clings stubbornly from when the garments were stored in a chest lined with old hay. You flick at it half-heartedly, knowing it won't be the last piece you find. Imagine paying good money for authentic medieval cosplay, only to discover that hay is, in fact, the original accessory. In town, homes are shuttered tight, their walls thick but poorly insulated. You picture families sleeping in the same bed, children tucked close to parents, dogs curled at their feet. It wasn't just affection. Sharing warmth was a necessity. Wool blankets, stuffed with feathers or scraps of cloth, covered them all. Yet even so, drafts slid through cracks in the wattle and daub, finding every gap the carpenter's hand missed. Some families hung tapestries against the walls, not as decoration, but as insulation. The cloth absorbed both cold and noise, creating the illusion of coziness. Historians still argue whether tapestries originated more for warmth or to flaunt wealth, but most agree they were at least an attempt at both. Your steps crunch over frozen dirt, the sound loud in the otherwise empty night. The soles of your boots are simple leather, stiff and unforgiving. You feel every stone through them, each one a reminder of why medieval feet were stronger than yours. Inside your boots, the woolen hose rubs at your heels, leaving you with the first tender hint of a blister. You wince, thinking that if this is only the second hour, by dawn your feet may be singing the full opera. The moonlight catches the edge of a frozen puddle, thin ice gleaming like glass. You prod it absent-mindedly with your staff, watching the cracks sprawl in lazy patterns across the surface. The sound is sharp and brittle, almost satisfying. Quirky fact: children in the Middle Ages likely found the same amusement, though they had fewer opportunities to waste time when daylight meant labor. But even so, shards of broken ice could be toys, or at least distractions, in a life otherwise dominated by chores and sermons. You allow yourself the moment, the sound echoing into the quiet night, before moving on. As you pass under an archway, you notice a darker patch of stone, damp where the cold has condensed the evening's mist. The walls seem alive with texture, lichen clinging in irregular patches, moss frozen into brittle curls. You wonder how many watchmen before you leaned in this same spot, brushing wool against stone, muttering complaints into the night. Perhaps thousands, over generations. You're part of a long, itchy, cold tradition. In the far distance, the faint chime of another bell reaches your ears. You pause, counting the strokes. It's later than you thought. The hours slip by when your senses are lulled into monotony. Still, there's comfort in the thought that bells connect you to others, to monks praying in cloisters, to bakers stirring fires for tomorrow's bread, to herders rising early in distant fields. The world feels both vast and small when ruled by bells. A gust tugs your hood back slightly, and the raw air brushes your cheek. You yank the hood forward again, muttering under your breath, though no one hears. Your voice feels swallowed by the night, as if the cold itself has muffled it. You smile faintly at the thought of soundproofing invented by weather. Now and then, you catch yourself longing for your bed, scratchy though it is. The straw mattress in your lodging waits for you, uneven and lumpy, but promising horizontal rest. You recall stuffing it yourself earlier, pressing the stalks into a rough sack, knowing they'll flatten long before they're replaced. The faint rustle of straw is soothing if you let it be, though the sharp ends poking through linen are less so. You've already decided which side of the mattress you'll claim, avoiding the worst lumps like a seasoned strategist. The night stretches on. Your hands ache, your feet grow sore, and the wool itches more with every step. But in the monotony, there's a kind of rhythm, a steady thrum of life as it was, layered, uncomfortable, unadorned, and strangely peaceful. The town sleeps, unaware of your restless walk, trusting that the watch keeps danger at bay. And though your garments scratch and your gloves fail to warm, you keep walking, wrapped in the fabric of history itself. The bell chimes again, low and heavy, rolling through the still night air like a slow reminder that time is not yours. You pause to listen, because the sound isn't just a measure of hours, it is the heartbeat of the town. Each note hums against the stones, rattling through the timber frames, and even the animals shift in their pens when the vibrations reach them. You find yourself counting without meaning to. 1, 2, 3, 4. The toll echoes, and then silence returns, thick and deep. You know that bells serve more purposes than keeping track of time. In medieval towns, bells rule life almost as much as kings or priests. They call monks to prayer, they warn of fire, they gather townsfolk for market, and they mourn the dead. It is a fact repeated so often it becomes almost dull. But when you are standing here on the wall, the truth of it seeps into your bones. Without the bells, the night would stretch like an endless, formless sea. With them, the hours are divided into portions you can survive. Historians still argue whether ordinary people cherished the order bells gave them, or if the constant ringing became a kind of sonic tyranny. Either way, you have no say in it. The bell rings, and you move. The sound lingers in your ears, and your thoughts drift. Imagine being the bell ringer, An unpaid, usually uncelebrated man dragging ropes in the dark tower above you. His hands would blister, his back would ache, but the town would never let him stop. Some places even made it illegal to neglect the bells, because silence could mean disaster. You glance up at the looming tower, wondering if he resents you for being the one who patrols outside while he hauls ropes inside. Two men, two different forms of monotony, both tethered to duty. You let your staff tap gently against the stone as you walk, trying to match the rhythm of your steps to the rhythm of the chimes. Tap, tap, tap. It becomes a kind of hypnotic beat, and for a moment you think you could walk forever, lulled by the repetition. Of course, your feet remind you quickly that they are not eternal machines. The ache in your heels grows sharper, spreading like fire ants under your skin. You sigh and keep moving. The houses around you are silent, windows shuttered, doors barred. Somewhere inside, a family stirs briefly. Maybe a baby cries. Maybe a man turns in his sleep after too much ale. The bell would have touched them too, filtering through wood and cloth. It doesn't matter that the hour is inconvenient. The bell dictates their night whether they wish it or not. You picture a mother pulling her child closer under a rough blanket, murmuring comfort. The sound of the bell might even soothe them, because it means the town is still alive, still safe, still ordered. You stop near a small chapel on the edge of the street. The bell there is smaller, its rope dangling just above reach. By day, the priest would ring it for Mass, but at night it hangs still, a silent counterpart to the great tower bell. The doorway smells faintly of incense, though the night air tries to scrub it clean. You lean against the wall for a moment, imagining the faithful kneeling here, their prayers punctuated by bells that they believed connected heaven and earth. Scholars sometimes debate whether bells carried more symbolic weight than practical use, but tonight you think both seem true. For you, the bell is timekeeping. For them, the bell is divine. You push yourself away and keep moving. The cold creeps deeper into your joints, and your breath fogs thicker now. You adjust your hood again, fumbling with stiff fingers. Your ears strain for the faintest noises beyond the expected. A shuffle in the straw, the squeak of a cart, or the whine of a hinge. Mostly, though, there is nothing. Just the bell's fading memory, and the emptiness after. In that emptiness, your mind wanders. You imagine what it must have been like in older centuries, before bells marked time in every town. Sundials by day, guesses by night. Farmers looking at stars. Watchmen like you, pacing with only instinct to tell them when hours pass. You shiver, realizing that as dull as these bells can seem, you would feel utterly lost without them. There is comfort in monotony. Even a sound you grow weary of becomes a tether to reality. A stray cat darts across your path, fur bristling, tail raised like a flag of disapproval. It vanishes between two houses, leaving only a faint yowl behind. You chuckle under your breath, imagining the cat ringing a tiny bell of its own, calling mice to their doom. A joke, perhaps, but bells really were tied to animals too, sometimes strapped around the necks of livestock so they wouldn't wander unseen. Picture a medieval cow jingling its way down a muddy lane, unintentionally providing a soundtrack to someone's sleepless night. The thought distracts you long enough that you stumble slightly on a loose stone. Your staff clatters against the ground, and the noise echoes louder than you'd like. You pause, embarrassed, though no one is around. The sound dies quickly, leaving only silence again, broken only by the faint ringing in your ears, where the great bell still lingers. You shake your head, amused, At least the bell has dignity. You, less so. Somewhere above, the clouds part briefly, and moonlight spills across the rooftops. It gleams on the frost that coats the shingles, making them shimmer faintly like silver scales. The beauty of it catches you off guard. You stand still, breathing slowly, letting the image sink in. The bell gave the night rhythm, but the moon gives it shape. Without one, you would lose your place in time. Without the other, you would lose your place in space. Both are reminders that you are small, that the world continues in its pattern, whether or not you notice. Your shift drags on, and the bell rings again. This time you know it is closer to dawn, though not close enough. You count the strokes, marking the progress, willing them to move faster. Each toll is both relief and torment. Relief because another hour has passed. Torment because too many still remain. You think of the bell ringer again, arms sore, eyes drooping, perhaps muttering prayers of his own. And in that moment, you realize that both of you are joined by sound. The rope he pulls, the steps you walk, the town that sleeps, all bound together by iron, hung in stone towers. You sigh, tighten your cloak, and keep moving. The echo of the bell fading into the quiet night once more. Your hand tightens on the wooden staff as you move past another stretch of wall. The cold has settled in for good now, and the wind seems intent on finding every loose fold of fabric in your cloak. The only real comfort you have is the lantern swinging from your hand, its weak glow pushing back just enough darkness to keep your feet steady. The light flickers as the tallow candle inside sputters, each gust threatening to snuff it out completely. You narrow your eyes, shielding it with your palm, because without this faint glow, you would be walking blind. The lantern itself is little more than a crude box with thin panels, sometimes horn or oiled cloth, trying to imitate glass. The tallow candle burns with a smell that is both smoky and faintly rancid, because tallow is nothing more than hardened animal fat. It is cheap, plentiful, and every night watchman relies on it, even if the odor makes you wrinkle your nose. The smoke clings to your cloak and hair until you carry it with you everywhere, a kind of medieval perfume no one asked for. And yet, without it, the night would stretch in complete obscurity. Historians still argue whether towns relied more on the moon or on these dim lanterns to guide them. But standing here in the shadows, you are quite sure the lantern is your lifeline. You pause for a moment to adjust the wick, noticing how the flame dances higher, throwing shifting patterns across the stones. Shadows stretch grotesquely long against the wall, bending into odd shapes, as if the darkness is playing tricks on you. You watch the shifting forms for a few seconds longer than you intend, half expecting them to move on their own. That is the curse of low light. Your mind fills in what your eyes cannot. The truth is, medieval towns at night were profoundly dark. No street lamps, no neon signs, no glow from windows powered by electricity. Once the sun set, the world collapsed into shades of gray and black, with only a candle or two standing guard against it. Fires in hearths glowed through cracks in shutters, but most people could not afford to waste wood simply to provide light. Night was for sleeping, and for those few like you who had to walk its length, the lantern was both tool and burden. You feel the weight of that burden every time you glance at the dwindling stub of candle. Sometimes the wax drips out of the bottom of the lantern, pooling into hardened blobs that you scrape off later. Other times, the flame gutters so low that you fear it won't last until your shift ends. You sigh, muttering under your breath. Perhaps you should have begged the bailiff for beeswax instead. But beeswax is expensive, reserved for churches monasteries, and wealthy households who insist their prayers or banquets should glow brighter than everyone else's. Quirky fact: some abbeys kept entire apiaries just to ensure a steady supply, because beeswax candles were considered pure enough to burn before God. For you, though, animal fat is the standard. Sacred light goes to the altar. Smoky light goes to the Watchman. The flame wavers again, and you instinctively cup the lantern with your hand. The glass, or rather, the thinly scraped horn panel, feels warm, almost hot. But you are grateful for the tiny comfort. The glow spreads across your fingers, giving you a momentary illusion that the night has retreated. A joke springs to mind. If anyone ever invented medieval mood lighting, it would be this: lantern glow and the faint scent of bacon gone wrong. Hardly romantic, but effective. You continue along the wall, eyes scanning the street below. The lantern beam catches the sheen of frost on a cart, abandoned for the night. It throws glints across a bucket, left near a door. Even a pile of refuse takes on new character when lit from the side. Suddenly, it looks less like garbage and more like a crouched figure. You slow your step, squinting, until the wind shifts and reveals nothing more sinister than discarded vegetable stalks. You exhale, laughing quietly at yourself. The lantern reveals, but it also deceives. Another gust nearly blows the flame out, and your heart jumps before it steadies again. You remember stories of watchmen who lost their lights and stumbled straight into ditches, unable to find their way until dawn. Others spoke of townsfolk waking to find a lanternless guard snoring against the wall, having given up entirely. That won't be you, not tonight. You adjust the lantern strap and keep it close to your chest, protecting it as though it were treasure. The silence presses harder in the dim glow. Every creak of wood, every rustle of straw, seems louder because of the light. Without it, the dark is absolute, and absolute dark has its own strange comfort. At least then, you can imagine nothing exists. But with a small circle of light, you see fragments of reality, and your mind invents horrors just beyond its edge. A sack leans against a wall. In your lantern's flicker, it looks like a crouched man. A bundle of firewood becomes a hunched figure. Your brain refuses to accept the simplicity of objects in half-light. You recall hearing that some towns experimented with mounted lanterns along main streets, crude predecessors of streetlights. They burned tallow too, but were maintained at great expense and effort. Most gave up, deciding the effort outweighed the benefit. After all, what use is light if most honest folk are already in bed? Darkness kept people indoors, and perhaps that was a kind of unspoken law. At night, the world belongs to shadows, and to the few men like you tasked with pacing through them. As you walk, you tilt the lantern toward the cobblestones, inspecting the ground. The stones glisten faintly with frost, and small puddles catch the flame like black mirrors. You see your own face reflected, warped by the surface. Eyes hollow, nose sharp, mouth curved downward. You chuckle softly, remarking to yourself that even your reflection looks tired of this duty. The flame dances across your features, reminding you that your world exists only in fragments of light. Still, you press on. The lantern sways in rhythm with your stride, throwing shadows like companions beside you. Sometimes they stretch ahead, tall and thin. Sometimes they shrink behind, chasing your heels. You almost greet them as friends, because in truth, the night offers little company otherwise. The light becomes a rhythm, a heartbeat, a comfort against the weight of endless dark. Another chime of the bell rolls through the air, joining the lantern in reminding you of your place. Sound and light, the twin guardians of your shift. You are grateful for them, even as they tire you. Without them, you would be walking blind in silence, swallowed by a night with no edges. At least this way, you know where you stand. The flame steadies, small but persistent, and you draw the lantern closer to your face, letting its warmth brush your skin. For a moment, you close your eyes, pretending it is the glow of a hearth, pretending you are seated by fire with a bowl of broth instead of out here with sore feet. The illusion fades quickly, but you savor it. In this life, small comforts must be treasured. So you keep moving, lantern swinging, staff tapping, breath curling in the air. The night remains vast and cold, but within your tiny circle of light, you carve out a space to exist. And that is enough. You round another corner, lantern still swaying, staff tapping a familiar rhythm. The streets stretch ahead of you like veins, narrow and winding, lined with crooked houses leaning into one another, as if they are conspiring in whispers. You squint into the shadows, because the stillness of night is never entirely still. Somewhere beyond your little pool of light, something always stirs. Suspicion is as much a tool of the watch as the staff you carry, and tonight you wield it with every glance. The first shape you notice is small, quick, and low to the ground. For an instant, your mind leaps to a lurking thief, but then the truth emerges. A pig, rooting through the scraps thrown from a baker's window earlier that day. Its snout burrows noisily into a heap of wilted greens and stale crusts, and you almost laugh. This is hardly the criminal mastermind you are meant to guard against. Yet pigs in towns were no laughing matter. They caused accidents, they blocked alleys, and sometimes they even sparked disputes when they damaged property. Some towns went so far as to try pigs in mock trials for crimes, condemning them for harm done. Historians still argue whether these trials were symbolic theater or earnest belief in holding animals accountable. But either way, you can imagine the absurdity of a pig standing before a magistrate. The pig snorts and trots away, vanishing down a lane, leaving you once more with silence. You shift your grip on the staff, moving on, ears pricked for anything larger or more deliberate than a scavenging animal. A thief would not want to be seen, yet your lantern might reveal him. You glance into a recessed doorway where shadows gather thick. Nothing. Still, you linger, because suspicion clings like smoke. You know that thieves often prefer the cover of darkness to test shutters or doors, hoping to find one left carelessly unbarred. It is your job to catch them in the act, or at least frighten them away. Your boots crunch against grit, and you tilt the lantern higher. In the distance, you catch the faint outline of another figure moving. Your shoulders tense until you realize it is no thief, but another watchman making his circuit. He raises a hand in weary salute, and you return the gesture, both of you comforted by the reminder that you are not alone in this long, cold vigil. The two of you exchange no words. The silence of night feels like a fragile glass that you hesitate to shatter. Instead, you nod once more and continue, letting the distance grow between you. As you patrol, you notice the subtle signs of life that linger even after bedtime. Smoke leaks from a shuttered window, where someone has stoked their hearth too long. A faint trickle of water runs in the gutter, icy and slow. Somewhere, a rooster crows far too early, confused by the moonlight. You catch it all in passing, cataloging each detail, because vigilance means never letting your mind drift too far into sleepiness. Of course, the joke is that most nights nothing at all happens. You are like a security guard in a world without alarms, meant to deter by presence more than by action. Yet you cannot help but imagine the kinds of mischief you might encounter. A drunkard staggering home, singing off-key, his neighbors cursing him through the walls. A pair of lovers sneaking out, thinking themselves unseen, leaving muddy tracks that you cannot help but notice. Even a wandering dog might earn your staff's attention if it made enough racket. Most of your patrol is less about catching crime and more about maintaining order, reminding people that someone is awake when they would rather not think about it. The lantern flickers again as you pass a small courtyard. You raise it, scanning the ground. There, in the dirt, you spot footprints that look fresher than the others, and you crouch, bringing the flame closer. They are uneven, pressed deep in places and shallow in others, perhaps from someone carrying a heavy sack. You straighten slowly, scanning the alley. Empty. Perhaps they were just made by a laborer returning late. Perhaps not. You walk on, but you file the thought away, letting suspicion whisper in the back of your mind. You chuckle to yourself, wondering if you are too suspicious. But then again, suspicion is what the job requires. If you simply trusted every shadow, you would be asleep in minutes. Your duty demands that you see menace in a sack of firewood or guilt in the hurried trot of a pig. It is what keeps you alert. And yet, there is humor in it. You remember an old tale of a watchman mistaking his own shadow for an intruder, chasing it half the night until dawn revealed his error. Quirky, yes, but believable. Shadows are tricky partners. The night grows colder, and the shadows thicker. You swing the lantern in slow arcs, watching how the light peels back corners of alleys like pages in a book. Each corner reveals the same emptiness. Shuttered windows, locked doors, silent stones. It should comfort you, but sometimes the sameness feels oppressive. Suspicion feeds on monotony as much as on movement. You imagine what might be hiding just beyond the light's reach, and your skin prickles. Then, unexpectedly, you hear a faint scrape. You freeze, lantern raised, staff ready. The sound comes again, a wooden door shifting slightly on its hinges. Your breath catches as you step closer, each foot deliberate, the lantern held high. You lean in, eyes narrowing, until the truth reveals itself. The wind, no more than that. The door rocks gently with each gust, creaking like a tired old man. You laugh under your breath, relief mingled with amusement, danger reduced to nothing more than weather. That is the rhythm of your watch. Fear, suspicion, relief, repeat. Still, the scrape lingers in your ears as you continue. The night is a gallery of sounds, each one exaggerated in the stillness. A rat scurries, a shutter rattles, a horse snorts in a stable. Each noise could be harmless, or it could be the start of trouble. You live in the uncertainty, letting your imagination wander just enough to stay awake. Historians still argue whether medieval watchmen were respected guardians or merely tolerated nuisances, but as you pace these streets, you suspect it was a bit of both. People sleep better knowing you are out here, even if they also complain that you wake them with your staff tapping or your muttered songs. You pause once more, scanning the street ahead. The lantern glows, the staff rests lightly in your hand, and suspicion hums like a second heartbeat. You know that most nights will end without excitement, but you also know that vigilance is what keeps order. So you breathe in the cold, tighten your cloak, and step forward again, watchful eyes on the shadows. The town depends on your suspicion, even if the only criminal you see tonight is another pig hunting scraps. The night deepens, and with it comes a change in the air. The lantern glow clings stubbornly to its little circle, but nothing can hide the faint odors drifting from the streets and alleys. You wrinkle your nose before you even fully realize why. Then it hits you. The unmistakable staleness of chamber pots emptied into gutters. The sour tang of human waste mingling with the acrid smoke of nearby hearths. The air itself feels thicker, as if each breath has been seasoned with the town's habits. You breathe through your mouth and try not to imagine where the puddle at your feet originated. Medieval towns were never famous for cleanliness, and nighttime only concentrated the evidence. Families often emptied chamber pots directly into the street, sometimes shouting a warning first, sometimes not. You picture a poor soul stumbling home from a tavern and learning this lesson the messy way. Historians still argue whether strict town laws about waste disposal were ever enforced consistently, or if authorities mostly turned a blind eye. Tonight, as you patrol these narrow lanes, you strongly suspect the latter. You step carefully over the trickling gutter water, trying to ignore the suspicious color it takes on in the lantern light. The soles of your boots, already worn thin, squelch faintly, and you sigh at the thought of what clings there. There is a reason straw was often scattered along the busiest streets, not only to soften the sound of hooves and carts, but also to soak up the less pleasant deposits. Of course, by night, the straw is soggy, muddy, and mixed with refuse. You scrape your boot lightly against a stone, though the effort is pointless. The smell is not all waste. It is also wood smoke, mingled with hints of charred meat drifting from a tavern kitchen that has only just banked its fire. It is the faint sweetness of yeast escaping from a bakery, where dough may already be rising for tomorrow's bread. And it is the earthy musk of livestock, chickens, goats, pigs, kept in pens that border homes or wander the streets. To modern sensibilities, it might seem unbearable, but for the people of your watch, it is simply life. Each scent is as familiar as the bell that tolls the hours. You tilt the lantern toward a side alley and catch sight of a stack of barrels. Their wooden staves gleam damp in the glow, and a sour stench rises from them. Likely waste collected for tanning hides, a craft notorious for its pungency. Tanners used urine as part of their process, soaking hides to soften them before working. You shake your head at the thought, grateful you patrol instead of laboring there. And yet, you cannot escape the smell. It seeps into everything, into wool and wood, and even into your memory. The cobblestones under your feet are slick with frost, but also with something less pure. You find yourself stepping with extra caution, the staff probing ahead like a blind man's cane. You think of how much worse it must be in summer, when the heat magnifies every odor, when flies swarm, and when waste runs quicker down the gutters. At least in this cold, some of it freezes, locking away its potency for a time. Small mercies. Still, the stench is so present tonight that your thoughts wander toward remedies. People in this age often carried pomanders, little balls filled with herbs or spices, to sniff when the air grew too foul. The wealthy might keep one dangling from their belt, ornate and shining, while ordinary folk relied on sprigs of rosemary or mint tucked in their cloaks. You, however, have nothing but wool, smoke, and your own patience. Perhaps you mutter a joke to yourself. If the air doesn't kill you, at least it clears your sinuses. The lantern flickers as you turn into a wider street. Here, the refuse has collected in piles, swept to the sides by earlier carts. You catch sight of a bucket tipped over, its contents frozen into a shapeless mound. You sigh again. Cleaning crews, if they can be called that, will arrive only after dawn, shoveling muck into carts and hauling it beyond the town walls. There, it will be dumped, left to rot, or sold to farmers who spread it over their fields. Fertilizer by one name, filth by another. The cycle continues, unpleasant, but necessary. A rat darts from the refuse heap, startling you for only a moment before disappearing into darkness. You expect it, really. Rats thrive here, as much a part of the town as bells and bread. You lift your lantern slightly higher, half expecting to see its fellows, but the shadows swallow them. You move on, staff tapping to announce your presence. The smell does not relent, but you find yourself growing accustomed. Your mind drifts to other details, the creak of a shutter loose in the wind, the faint glimmer of moonlight bouncing from a puddle, the sound of your boots slipping on frost. The senses blur together until even the foul air becomes part of the rhythm. You breathe slower, not because it is pleasant, but because there is no use fighting what cannot change. You wonder how townsfolk endure it every day. Perhaps they do not notice at all. Perhaps their noses, trained from childhood, filter the sense into something ordinary. Maybe they even link smells with comfort. The smoke of a hearth with safety, the musk of animals with sustenance, the yeast of bread with survival. It is not so different from how you find comfort in bells, even as they intrude on your rest. Historians still argue whether medieval towns were truly as filthy as chroniclers claimed, or if outsiders exaggerated for dramatic effect. Tonight, standing in the middle of it, you lean toward believing the chroniclers. You press on, weaving through narrow lanes where the air seems thicker still. A breeze lifts your hood slightly, and you close your eyes for a moment, letting the wind dilute the stench. It carries the distant sound of dogs barking, then quiet again. You smile faintly, because the dogs at least have noses keener than yours, and if they can survive here, so can you. At last you step into a clearer street. The wind moves more freely here, sweeping away some of the worst of the odor. You inhale deeply, savoring the relative freshness, though it still carries undertones of smoke and manure. You let the lantern swing wider, scanning the road ahead. The worst may be behind you, but you know it will return with the next alley, the next bucket, the next careless shout of "Gardez-lo" as someone empties a pot. You sigh, shoulders slumping slightly, then straighten again. This is part of the watch, to endure the smells, to step where others will not, to keep walking through streets that others escape. It is not glamorous, it is not clean, but it is necessary. You keep your staff steady, your lantern bright, and your eyes forward. The air may sting your nose, but the town still sleeps. And that, in the end, is the point. You follow the curve of the street until it widens near the edge of town. The air feels slightly less sour here, though the scent of smoke and dung still clings as stubbornly as frost. Ahead rises the gatehouse, a squat tower of timber and stone, marking the boundary between inside and out. It looms with a sort of weary authority, neither grand nor delicate, but built to endure. You shift your staff to your other hand, because the sight of the gate always brings a small change of pace. This is where danger, however distant, might first appear. The lantern glow bounces off the heavy doors, iron-bound and scarred by years of use. They are closed now, bolted from within. But you know that during the day, carts stream through here, wheels rattling over cobblestones, as merchants shout and guards wave them along. At night, though, everything tightens. The gates stay locked, and the watch becomes the first line of reassurance for townsfolk asleep behind these walls. A guard standing at the gate is not so different from a parent checking a locked door before bed. 2 men are posted here tonight, their cloaks drawn tight, their spears planted like stakes. You nod as you approach, and one nods back, his face half hidden by the shadow of his hood. The other rubs his hands together, muttering about the cold. They are weary, but their eyes remain sharp. You can tell because they glance toward you, then toward the horizon beyond the wall, as if to remind themselves where true danger might lie. Historians still argue whether medieval towns truly feared nightly raids, as much as chroniclers described, or whether such tales were exaggerated for drama. Yet standing here, staring into the black emptiness beyond the walls, you think the fear feels very real indeed. The gatehouse creaks faintly as wind pushes against its timbers. You pause beneath it, letting the lantern light spill over the bolts and hinges. Everything looks secure, but suspicion urges you to test them anyway. You run your hand over cold metal, tugging slightly at the bar, listening for the reassuring resistance. All is firm. Still, you imagine what it would be like if someone tried to batter through. The heavy timbers would hold for a time, but not forever. Inside, townsfolk would panic. Bells would ring wildly, and your watch would become a scramble instead of a walk. You shiver, not only from cold, but from the thought. Beyond the gate, fields stretch into darkness. You cannot see them now, but you know their outlines. Plowed furrows stiff with frost, hedges drawn thin, and the road trailing onward toward other towns. By day, it bustles with travelers, but at night it is empty, except for wolves perhaps, or wanderers lost. Occasionally, desperate souls try to slip into town after hours, pounding at the gate until someone answers. You recall hearing about one such soul last winter, a woman who claimed she had been robbed on the road and begged entry. The guards argued until dawn whether she was genuine or part of a trap. Historians still argue whether medieval towns were truly as ruthless about locking outsiders out, but the balance between mercy and safety was never simple. One of the guards clears his throat, breaking your thought. He mutters about wishing for wine, and the other chuckles softly, though neither moves. It is a shared joke. Warmth always sits just out of reach. You add a quiet quip of your own, suggesting that if anyone ever smuggled a barrel past the bailiff, this would be the place to hide it. The three of you laugh, low and brief, careful not to shatter the hush of the night. Humor, even dry, helps the hours pass. You shift your lantern outward, holding it toward the road beyond. The light falls uselessly against the dark, a tiny ember swallowed by an ocean of shadow. You stare for a moment, eyes straining as if expecting to see something. An approaching cart, a figure trudging home, even the glint of eyes from a fox or wolf. Nothing. The darkness offers no answer, only the weight of endless distance. You pull the lantern back, comforted again by the circle of light close to your feet. The stone bench beside the gatehouse tempts you. It is rough, chipped by years of use, but still a place to rest weary legs. For a moment you imagine sitting, letting your body sink into the cold stone, closing your eyes until the next bell. But no, the bailiff has eyes everywhere, or at least you convince yourself he does. Better to keep moving, to show vigilance. So you remain standing, leaning slightly on your staff, watching the gate. The guards shift again, stamping their feet against the cobbles. You watch their breath curl in clouds, mingling with your own. For all three of you, the gate is both burden and comfort. It is a barrier that keeps danger out, but also a reminder that danger exists, pressing invisibly just beyond. You wonder what stories the guards tell themselves to pass the time. Perhaps they imagine invaders sweeping across the fields, or perhaps they imagine nothing at all. letting their minds drift toward sleep, even as their eyes stay open. The lantern flickers, and you raise it higher, letting the flame throw light across the gate once more. The wood gleams, scarred but sturdy. A carving marks one plank, a faint cross, scratched by someone long ago, perhaps for protection. You trace it with your eyes, wondering if superstition offered the same comfort as spears and bolts. Maybe both together were stronger than either alone. You smile faintly, because in this age, faith and practicality are rarely separate. For a moment, silence deepens, and you all listen. The wind dies, and the faint noises of town fade. Even the dogs are quiet. It is one of those rare moments when the world feels truly still, as if holding its breath. You and the guards exchange a glance, half uneasy, half resigned. Nothing happens, of course, but the shared pause lingers. Then, as if on cue, the bell tolls again. Its heavy sound rolls through the night, breaking the spell, reminding you of time's steady march. The guards nod, and you nod back, resuming your slow steps along the wall. The gatehouse fades behind you, swallowed by shadow, but its presence stays with you. It is both boundary and promise, a reminder that though the world is dark, the town sleeps safe for now. Your staff taps once more against the cobblestones. The lantern sways, your cloak rustles, and the rhythm of your watch continues. The gatehouse is behind you, but many streets still lie ahead. You adjust your hood, exhale into the cold, and move on, suspicion humming quietly with each step. The houses crowd close again as you move away from the gatehouse, their upper stories leaning inward until the street feels more like a tunnel. The lantern glow glances off timber beams, picking out crooked lines and sagging edges, proof that these homes have endured long years of weather and wear. Behind those walls, the town sleeps, or at least tries to. But sleep in this age is never the solid, uninterrupted span you might imagine. It comes in fragments, shallow and easily broken, like the sputtering flame inside your lantern. Most families turn in early, long before your watch begins. Darkness leaves them little choice. They gather in single rooms, children pressed close to parents, blankets layered as best they can. The day's work exhausts them, but the cold ensures no one sinks into perfect rest. You picture them stirring at every creak, every gust of wind. Someone shifts, a child whimpers, a mother pulls her shawl tighter, a rooster mistakes moonlight for dawn and crows too early, shattering the fragile quiet. Sleep fractures again, and the night stretches on. Historians still argue whether medieval people experienced what scholars now call segmented sleep. Some evidence suggests they often woke in the middle of the night, calling that time the first sleep and second sleep. Families might wake to stoke fires, whisper prayers, or even visit neighbors briefly before lying down again. You imagine it now, a man padding across a room to stir embers, his wife murmuring a prayer for protection, their children rolling back into uneasy slumber. Night is never simple rest. It is a cycle of waking and dozing, shaped by cold, by noise, and by necessity. The thought makes you glance upward. Through a gap between rooftops, stars scatter across the sky, faint but steady. You wonder how many insomniac eyes stare at them from behind shuttered windows. Restless minds, chasing worries of crops, debts, or illness. You suspect more than a few. People claim the night belongs to sleep, but for many it belongs to thoughts they cannot quiet. You pause at a corner where the street narrows. The smell of smoke hangs heavier here, seeping from chimneys where families still bank coals against the chill. Some of them will wake in an hour, to stir those fires again, unwilling to let warmth die completely. The faint crackle reaches your ears, muffled by walls, but enough to remind you that life continues, even in supposed stillness. You smile faintly, thinking of the countless beds where someone is awake even now, eyes open in the dark, listening to the same creaks you do. You adjust your cloak and step onward. As you pass a small cottage, you hear it, a muffled cough, followed by a baby's thin cry. The sound pierces the quiet, rising, then falling as a mother shushes softly. The rhythm of her voice hums like a lullaby, blending with the night until the child quiets. You picture her rocking gently, her own eyes heavy, but her duty unrelenting. Parenthood does not sleep, even if the rest of the house tries to. Your lantern light glints on a small window shutter, cracked slightly open. Through it, you glimpse a faint glow. Someone still awake, perhaps mending, perhaps whispering prayers. In some homes, sleeplessness is filled with tasks: sewing torn hose, preparing food for morning, whispering with a spouse about debts or gossip. You imagine one weary woman pricking her fingers in dim light, cursing softly, then laughing at her own frustration. Life in these houses is not only labor, but moments of weary humor, even in the middle of the night. The air grows colder as you pass another row of homes. Frost glitters on the wood, and your breath curls white. You think of how hard it must be to keep warm inside, where even thick blankets fail to block the drafts. Families often huddle together on straw mattresses, dogs tucked at their feet for extra heat. Quirky detail. Some even placed warm stones wrapped in cloth at the ends of beds, makeshift predecessors to hot water bottles. You imagine toes pressing against them, sighing with fleeting comfort before the stone cools. A shutter bangs suddenly, jolted loose by the wind. The sound echoes down the lane, sharp and startling, enough to make your grip on the staff tighten. Then silence returns, save for the faint creak as the shutter swings. You chuckle under your breath, muttering that some family is likely awake now, grumbling about their window and debating who will rise to fix it. Another fracture in their fragile sleep. You turn down another alley, narrower still. Here, the silence is thicker, but you know it is an illusion. Behind every wall, life shifts and stirs. Some dream, some lie awake, some cough or whisper or argue. The night does not erase these lives. It only muffles them. You think of segmented sleep again, and how many of these families may soon stir for their midnight wakefulness. Perhaps one will kneel in prayer, another will sneak outside to relieve himself, another will check the livestock. You pass unnoticed, yet your footsteps become part of their night, as surely as their sounds become part of yours. The lantern flame flutters low, and you pause to adjust it, pinching the wick with practiced care. As it steadies, you catch a flicker of movement, a curtain drawn quickly shut. Someone awake inside, watching the night watch pass. You smile faintly. Perhaps they feel safer seeing you, or perhaps they worry that your presence means danger nearby. Either way, your existence has disturbed their rest, however briefly. It is a strange irony. The watch keeps townsfolk safe, but also ensures that some cannot sleep undisturbed. You continue, steps steady, staff tapping. The night hums with small sounds, fragments of wakefulness layered over slumber. Each cough, each creak, each whisper reminds you that sleep here is fragile, fractured by the needs of bodies and houses alike. You imagine what dawn will bring: bleary eyes, stiff joints, children yawning as they fetch water, adults trudging to market with fatigue still heavy. Yet it is simply life, ordinary and relentless. Historians still argue whether this segmented rhythm of sleep was a curse of poverty and cold, or a natural pattern humans have since forgotten. You cannot decide which view feels truer. All you know is that as you patrol these streets, you feel the restless energy seeping from every shuttered home. Sleep may be the dream of the night, but wakefulness is its reality. You pull your cloak tighter, breathe deeply of the smoke-laden air, and press on. The lantern glows faintly, the staff taps in rhythm, and the town slumbers imperfectly around you. The night stretches on, and so does your watch. You round another corner, and find yourself walking past a cluster of houses where the air smells different. Not just smoke and frost now, but sharper, more pungent notes that make you lift your head curiously. Someone has hung bundles of herbs near their door, sprigs of rosemary, dried sage, and a few strands of garlic tied with twine. They sway gently in the night air, shadows twitching under your lantern's light. You breathe in, half grateful for the freshness, half amused at how even the strongest herbs cannot quite drown the background smell of chamber pots. In this age, herbs are more than flavoring for food. They are medicine, charms, and daily tools. You know that many households dry nettles, mint, or thyme, steeping them in water to brew rough teas for everything from coughs to chills. Quirky recipes abound. One woman swears that nettle tea will warm your bones faster than fire, while another insists that garlic cloves hung around the neck keep away fevers. Historians still argue whether these practices were genuine attempts at healing or mostly symbolic acts. But in truth, they are both. Remedies blur the line between science and superstition. You step closer to a door, where a pouch of dried lavender dangles from the lintel. The scent drifts faintly, calming in a way that surprises you. Perhaps it is meant to soothe restless sleepers inside. Perhaps it is meant to drive away pests, or perhaps both. In towns like this, where sleep comes in fragments and illness spreads quickly, any comfort is welcome. You wonder how many families believe more in these herbs than in the prayers murmured at church. Your lantern catches another detail: a row of small bottles on a windowsill. Their contents glow faintly greenish, the liquid inside catching the light. Likely concoctions of vinegar steeped with rosemary or sage, meant to fight foul air. Physicians of the time often argued that sickness spread through miasma, the bad air that seemed to seep from swamps, waste, and even certain people. So townsfolk armed themselves with vinegar rinses, scented oils, and pungent herbs. You chuckle softly, thinking that the whole town must smell like a badly managed spice cabinet when illness strikes. As you walk, your staff taps near a trough filled with water. A thin sheet of ice coats it, but beneath you see floating fragments, bits of herbs tossed in earlier. Someone likely whispered over the water, blessing it as protection. Quirky traditions insist that certain herbs steeped overnight gain powers when bathed in moonlight. You stare a moment longer, amused by the thought that the very puddle a horse might drink from is also considered a ward against evil. You adjust your cloak and continue down the lane. The cold bites harder here, perhaps sharpened by the scents. You recall stories of odd remedies carried in pouches, dried toad bones, iron nails, or even teeth. People swore these objects could cure fevers, cramps, or nightmares. The line between doctor, herbalist, and conjurer was thin. You laugh quietly, imagining a watchman like yourself complaining of sore feet, only to be handed a bag of crushed snail shells with instructions to sprinkle them inside his boots. You suspect it would cure nothing but patience. Yet not all is fanciful. You know that herbs did have uses. Willow bark eased pain, mint calmed stomachs, and garlic truly fought infections in ways medieval healers could not explain, but instinctively trusted. The mixture of effective medicine and hopeful superstition is what defines the remedies you see around you now. Families cling to both because both offer hope. You pause near another doorway where sprigs of juniper hang. The berries, sharp and aromatic, are said to purify air and ward off plague. You rub one between your gloved fingers, releasing the scent, and for a moment the street smells fresher. You imagine a family inside sleeping easier because they believe this simple act keeps death from their home. Belief itself becomes the remedy. The lantern sputters, and you raise it higher. Its glow falls on a small shrine tucked into the wall of a house. A crude wooden cross, a bowl filled with dried herbs, and a stone carved with strange markings rest together. Faith and folk practice blend here, one reinforcing the other. You stare at it longer than you intend, curious at the layers of meaning. Is the cross the stronger protection, or the herbs? Or is it simply that people feel stronger when they use both? Historians still argue whether this blend of religion and folk remedy was encouraged or condemned by the church, but on the ground, people used whatever gave comfort. The night air cuts through you again, and you pull your cloak tight. The scents linger in your nose, pungent and oddly reassuring. You imagine how the town might look by day. Herbs strung across doorways like garlands, bottles lining windows, pouches tucked into belts. A whole landscape of belief, half medicinal, half magical. You wonder if outsiders laugh at it, or if they too clutch sprigs of rosemary when the wind grows foul. As you round another corner, the smell shifts once more. Now it is stronger, harsher. Vinegar, sharp enough to sting your eyes. Someone nearby must be preparing a remedy. You picture a woman bending over a bowl, steeping garlic and herbs in vinegar, muttering about keeping away sickness. The scent drifts into the street, joining the night air until even you feel its bite. You cough softly, then laugh at yourself. At least it masks the smell of refuse. You walk on, step steady, staff tapping. The lantern light glances across bundles of herbs tied under eaves, bottles glowing faintly, shrines tucked into corners. The town sleeps restlessly, but its people cling to these small protections. You find yourself oddly comforted by it too. Even if the remedies are half superstition, they represent a determination to fight what cannot be seen. You respect that. Your patrol continues, and the smells fade gradually behind you. The night returns to its usual mix of frost and smoke, but you carry the memory of lavender, juniper, and garlic with you. Perhaps later, when fatigue makes your feet heavy, you will recall those scents as a reminder that people fight darkness in many ways, not just with Watchmen, but with herbs, prayers, and stubborn hope. You breathe deeply, even of the cold, because at least now, the air feels alive with more than waste. And as you keep walking, you realize that in its own way, the town is awake with you, even if most eyes are closed. Your lantern sways as you step into a broader lane, and at once you hear the faint scuffle of claws against stone. You halt, raising the light just enough to catch a flicker of movement along the wall. There it is, a rat, whiskers twitching, body sleek with hunger, darting from shadow to shadow. Then another. You are not surprised. Where there is food and waste, there are rats, and medieval towns are never without them. They skitter boldly here, as much residents of the streets as the humans sleeping behind shutters. The rats are quick, vanishing into cracks between stones, but the sound of their tiny feet lingers. You sigh, tightening your grip on the staff, though you know there is little you can do. Rats thrive on scraps, surviving the cold better than many townsfolk. Their presence is loathed, yet accepted. Cats prowl the alleys too, silent and purposeful, their eyes glowing faintly when your lantern beam catches them. They slip between barrels and rooftops, shadows with tails. Hunters tolerated because they keep the rat numbers in check. You watch one pause, crouched low, then spring into the dark after unseen prey. Historians still argue whether medieval towns truly valued cats as pest control, or whether their reputation as symbols of witchcraft outweighed their usefulness. In some places, cats were cherished companions. In others, they were distrusted, even persecuted. Yet looking at the confident arch of the cat's back, the grace of its movement, you doubt anyone here would banish them completely. The rats are too many, too bold. The cats earn their place. You move forward, the lantern revealing piles of straw near a stable. More rats scatter, vanishing under boards, tails flicking like tiny whips. You mutter under your breath, amused at how you, the armed watchman, command less fear than a single prowling cat. Perhaps you should hire one as your deputy. The thought makes you chuckle softly, the sound swallowed by the night. The stable air is thicker, warmer with the smell of animals. Horses shuffle in their stalls, hooves striking softly against wood. A cat darts past your feet, vanishing into the shadows beyond the stable door. Its mewling echoes faintly, followed by the squeal of a captured rat. You shake your head, smiling grimly. Justice is swifter in the animal world than in the bailiff's court. Still, the rat population is more than a nuisance. You think of grain stores raided by whiskered thieves, of cloth chewed ragged, of illness whispered to follow their trails. People here speak of rats carrying sickness, though they cannot name exactly how. Later centuries will place blame more firmly, but even now there is suspicion. And yet people tolerate them because they must. To eliminate rats entirely would mean changing how food and waste are handled, and that is beyond the power of any single town. Your lantern flickers across another corner where children left scraps earlier in the day. An apple core, a torn piece of bread. A pair of rats gnaw at the crust, eyes glittering in the light. They scatter when you step closer, but not far. They linger, bold enough to wait for you to pass so they can return. You lift your staff and tap it against the ground, sending them scurrying, though you know it is only temporary. This street belongs to them as much as to you. You pause near a low wall and rest your hand against the stone. There, perched just above eye level, another cat sits watching you. Its tail flicks lazily, eyes reflecting the lantern glow like tiny coins. It regards you with indifference, as though to say, "You walk the streets for duty, but I walk them for survival." You nod slightly, acknowledging its superiority. Then it leaps silently down, disappearing into the dark. Quirky stories surround cats in these times. Some say they are sacred, linked to fortune and fertility, while others whisper that witches keep them as familiars. You recall hearing that sailors kept cats on ships for luck and for rat catching. Their presence as valued as any sailors. On land, though, suspicion lingers. People might pet a cat one day and drive it off with stones the next, uncertain whether it carries blessing or curse. You shake your head at the contradiction, though perhaps it is not so strange. In a world so fragile, people cling to any sign of control, even if it changes with the weather. The rats reappear, scurrying along the gutter where waste trickles slowly. Their squeaks mingle with the creak of shutters, the snort of a horse, the distant toll of a bell. You walk on, the lantern glow catching their movements, revealing them, then losing them again. They are tireless, and so must you be. You wonder if watchmen of centuries to come will patrol cleaner streets, or if even they will tap their staffs at the sound of unseen feet. The lantern grows warm in your hand, the flame steady. You let it swing lower, lighting your path, but not chasing every shadow. After all, the town cannot be purged of its creatures, nor can your duty extend to every corner. Instead, you accept their presence, as the townsfolk do. Rats and cats, thieves and guards, all part of the same nocturnal rhythm. Your boots scrape against stone, echoing down the lane. Another rat bolts across your path, bold enough to brush against your boot before vanishing. You mutter a curse, then laugh at yourself. What is one more rat in a town already claimed by hundreds? Perhaps the real joke is that you, sworn to keep order, are just another player in their endless game of survival. The bell tolls again, low and deliberate, reminding you of the hour. The sound mingles with the faint cries of cats hunting, the rustle of rats fleeing, and the steady beat of your footsteps. Together, they weave the soundtrack of this night. You keep walking, lantern raised, staff steady, eyes sharp. The town sleeps, and while it dreams, its smaller residents prowl. You too prowl, though with different purpose. You turn into another alley, narrow and damp. Here, the shadows feel thicker, the smell sharper. Rats dart along the walls, vanishing into holes worn by time. A cat crouches near a barrel, watching them with patient stillness. You linger a moment, letting the lantern light fall on the scene. Predator and prey, each with their place, neither concerned with your presence. Then you move on, leaving them to their eternal contest. Your watch continues. The rats will return, the cats will follow, and you will keep walking. Each has its role, each its rhythm, and in the silence of night, when the town sleeps and shadows stretch long, you realize that this balance, unwanted yet unbroken, is what keeps the streets alive. The night wears on, and though fatigue creeps into your bones, you notice a subtle shift in the air. It is no longer the deep silence of midnight, but the gradual stirring of something else. Dawn is still distant, but the first signs of change come not from the sky, but from the road. Your ears catch the faint rumble of wheels, muffled at first, then clearer as they draw near. You pause, lantern lifted, staff tapping lightly against the stones, and wait for the shapes to emerge. Out of the darkness, a cart trundles forward, its wooden wheels squeaking against the frozen ruts. A mule pulls it, ears flicking, breath steaming. Behind the animal, hunched under a cloak, a merchant guides the reins with slow determination. His cart is piled with sacks and barrels, covered by a tarpaulin to keep the frost from stiffening the goods too much. You know he has likely traveled through the night to reach the town by morning, hoping to claim the best spot in the market square. Others follow. Another cart creaks, this one with baskets stacked high, their contents hidden in the shadows. Then another, its driver humming a low tune to himself, perhaps to keep from falling asleep. The watch always sees the first wave of merchants arrive before dawn. They want to be in place as the square wakes, ready for townsfolk with coins or bartered goods in hand. It is the rhythm of trade, as steady as the toll of bells. Historians still argue whether these early arrivals were mostly local farmers or long-distance traders. But for you, the difference is meaningless. All that matters is that they arrive, and the market will soon stir. You raise your lantern higher as one of the carts slows near you. The driver lifts a hand in brief acknowledgement. His face is red with cold, his eyes half-lidded with exhaustion, but there is also eagerness there. He asks, voice muffled under his hood, whether the gate has opened yet. You shake your head, gesturing toward the gatehouse behind you. It will open soon enough, when the bailiff or guards deem it time. The merchant sighs, resigned, then nudges his mule forward again. He will wait, as he always does, until the town wakes. The clatter of carts grows more frequent. You hear the shuffle of boots, the calls of men to their animals, the squeak of axles. Some carts jostle for position along the road, merchants calling out half-hearted insults, already competing for the day's trade before a single stall is built. You watch them pass, amused at their stubbornness. Even in the cold dark, ambition drives them. Your lantern light glances across the goods as they roll by. A basket tips slightly, revealing cabbages packed tight. A sack shifts, spilling a glimpse of grain. Another cart smells strongly of fish, its driver pulling a cloth tighter to shield it from the freezing air. You wrinkle your nose, grateful the frost dulls the smell somewhat. You think of the square soon filled with these wares, a patchwork of smells and sounds, from bread ovens crackling to chickens clucking angrily in cages. Quirky detail. Some merchants travel with musicians or jesters to draw attention to their stalls, believing that entertainment lures customers as much as the goods themselves. You recall hearing of one who brought a trained goat, balancing on a beam to amuse children while their parents bought cheese. You smile at the thought, wondering if tonight's arrivals hide similar oddities under their tarps. The carts continue to gather near the gate, wheels crunching over frost. Drivers dismount, stretching stiff legs, muttering to one another. Some sip from flasks, steam curling from their mouths as they pass wine or ale. They huddle in groups, voices low but growing as numbers increase. Their presence changes the night. Where earlier you walked alone through silence, now there is a hum, the prelude to day. You pace slowly among them, staff tapping, lantern casting its glow. You catch fragments of conversation, worries about prices, complaints about taxes, jokes about mules too stubborn to pull. One man curses softly as his wheel catches in a rut. Another laughs as he boasts of the fine cloth he carries. The town is still asleep, but life is gathering here like embers ready to flare. Historians still argue whether medieval markets were more about necessity or community. Certainly they were for trade, but they were also for gossip, for arranging marriages, for settling disputes. You imagine how many of today's meetings will begin in these carts, huddled by the gate. Long before stalls are even set up, the market is more than commerce. It is the stage on which townsfolk act out their lives. The bell tolls again, low and steady, and the merchants pause. Some glance up, muttering about how many hours remain before dawn. Others shrug, resigned to waiting. The sound reassures you, though, as it always does. Time continues. The town remains steady, and soon the gates will open. You step aside as another cart rolls past, its driver more alert than the rest. His goods are stacked neatly, tied down with rope. He tips his hat in your direction, a courtesy rare enough that you nod back warmly. Then he joins the line of others waiting by the gate. The cluster grows larger, their shadows dancing against the walls in your lantern's flicker. The animals shift restlessly, hooves striking sparks from stone. One mule brays loudly, startling a nearby dog that trots off whining. Laughter follows, soft but contagious. Even in the cold, even in weariness, Humor finds its way in. You smile too, because laughter breaks the monotony better than any lantern. You continue pacing, staff steady, lantern glowing. The merchants chatter, the carts creak, the animals stamp. The night is changing, and you feel it in your bones. This is no longer the dead stillness of midnight, but the slow, inevitable rise of life. The market is coming, and with it, the day. You breathe deeply, taking in the mingled smells of hay, fish, and frost. It is not pleasant, but it is vivid, alive. You glance back once toward the town's heart, imagining the square soon filled with voices, colors, and clamor. For now, it remains dark and silent, but the promise is already here, lined up at the gate. Your watch continues, but with company now. No longer just rats and cats, but merchants with their wares, waiting for dawn. You adjust your cloak, lift the lantern higher, and step forward once more. The town is waking, slowly, and you are here to see the first spark of it. You leave the murmuring merchants behind for a time, returning to narrower streets where silence rules again. The lantern glows softly, throwing faint halos across doorways and shuttered windows. The cold gnaws at your stomach now, a hollow ache that no amount of cloak adjusting can soften. You pause, leaning lightly on your staff, and let your thoughts drift toward food. Even the memory of bread feels comforting, though you know well how coarse and unadorned it truly is. Bread is the staple here, dense and dark, often made from rye or barley. Wheat, prized for its lighter texture, is scarce and expensive. The loaves you will find at dawn are hard-crusted, sometimes sour, sometimes flecked with bits of husk that crunch unpleasantly between teeth. Still, they fill the stomach, and filling the stomach is what matters. You remember hearing how peasants sometimes mixed ground peas or beans into the dough, stretching it further, or even bark in the worst of years. Historians still argue whether such substitutions were common desperation or rare necessity, but you know the truth lies somewhere in between. Hunger ensures creativity, however unappetizing. Your feet carry you past a baker's shop, dark now, though faint warmth lingers in the bricks of its oven wall. The scent has seeped into the wood, mingling with the smoke of countless fires. You pause, closing your eyes. For a moment, breathing deeply of the ghostly fragrance. Tomorrow, before dawn fully breaks, the baker will stoke his fire again, sliding loaves into the heat. Families will crowd the doorway, clutching coins or bundles of eggs to barter. The rhythm is as old as the town itself. Bread as life. Bread as currency. Bread as symbol. Your stomach growls, and you laugh softly, muttering to yourself that no guard can watch forever on an empty belly. You imagine a steaming bowl of gruel, oats or barley boiled with water, perhaps enlivened with a little milk if fortune smiles. Gruel is the fuel of the common household, unremarkable but steady, thick enough to stand a spoon in, thin enough to stretch for many mouths. You picture yourself hunched over the bowl, spoon scraping at the bottom, grateful for warmth more than flavor. Ale, too, will come with the dawn. Weak, thin, often clouded, but safer than water scooped straight from the river. Children drink it, elders drink it, workers gulp it down at midday. Brewing is as much a household task as baking, though taverns claim their share too. The yeast gives it a tang, and sometimes herbs are added for bitterness. You imagine lifting a cup, foam clinging to your lip, and for a moment the cold feels less sharp. Quirky fact: In some towns, ale tasters were appointed to ensure quality, though you suspect their role included more drinking than testing. You continue walking, the hunger gnawing steadily. Your mind wanders further into flavors, though they are meager. A lump of cheese, perhaps, sharp and salty, cut from a wheel hardened by weeks of curing. A thin slice of salted fish, chewy and briny, eaten with bread. Maybe a handful of peas, boiled until mushy. Meals here are built not for pleasure, but endurance. Each bite is a bargain with survival. And yet, shared meals still carry joy. You think of families laughing over coarse bread, telling stories as they sip ale. The act of togetherness seasoning the food more than any spice. Historians still argue whether the medieval diet left most people malnourished or merely monotonous. There is truth in both views. Variety is rare, but sustenance is steady enough for those who work hard and share what little they have. You suspect the truth is visible in the faces you pass each day. Lean, weathered, but alive. That, in itself, is proof that gruel and ale serve their purpose. Your lantern beam brushes across a tavern door, barred for the night. Inside, you imagine the remnants of a feast. Bones scattered on plates, crusts of bread left behind, a half-drained pitcher of ale. Perhaps a minstrel's song still lingers in the rafters, though the patrons now snore against tables or stumble home through alleys. Taverns are not only for food and drink, but for fellowship, gossip, and escape from daily toil. You smile faintly, imagining the laughter that shook these walls only hours ago. Your own meal will be simpler when dawn comes. Bread, perhaps dipped in broth, washed down with ale. Maybe a fortune smiles, a sliver of cured meat, or an onion for sharpness. You chuckle softly at the thought of calling it a banquet. But in truth, after hours of walking, your body will welcome anything warm, anything filling. Hunger makes kings of common fare. The lantern sputters as a gust of wind presses against it, and you shield it quickly. The thought of your next meal keeps you moving. You imagine the crackle of a fire, the steam of porridge, the comfort of tearing bread apart with your hands. Even the ache in your legs feels easier when balanced by the promise of food. Perhaps that is why thoughts of meals linger so strongly during the watch. They give shape to the hours, marking the end of duty with something tangible. You pass another alley where a faint smell drifts out. Someone inside has left a pot simmering. Cabbage, perhaps, or beans. The odor is humble, but to you, it feels like a feast. You close your eyes briefly, letting the scent soak into memory. It is these small details, more than the grand bells or heavy gates, that define the rhythm of the town. The taste of bread, the steam of porridge, the tang of ale. They are the anchors that hold lives steady against hunger and fatigue. You adjust your cloak, smiling faintly at your own imaginings. The night stretches on, but you know dawn will bring both work and reward. The market will bustle, the ovens will glow, the taverns will open, and your own hunger will finally be answered. Until then, you walk, lantern steady, staff tapping, stomach reminding you that survival is always built one simple meal at a time. Your patrol carries you toward a quieter part of town, where the streets grow narrower and the houses press close. The lantern swings at your side, its glow brushing rough plaster walls and warped timbers. The cold gnaws steadily, and your feet throb with each step. At last, you find yourself near the watch post, a squat building with smoke faintly curling from a chimney. Relief stirs in you, not because the shift is finished, but because here, at least, you will find the company of others who share the same weary path. Inside, the air is thick with smoke and the smell of damp wool. A few watchmen huddle near the hearth, their cloaks steaming faintly as the fire pushes back the chill. You join them, setting the lantern on a shelf, grateful for the momentary warmth. The men glance up and nod in greeting. Their faces are lined by fatigue, eyes heavy-lidded, but there is a spark of camaraderie in their gestures. You ease yourself onto a bench, the wood creaking under your weight. For a few minutes, the streets can wait. Someone pushes a mug into your hand. It is not ale, but weak broth warmed over the coals, thin and smoky. You sip gratefully, letting the warmth trickle through your chest. Around you, the murmur of voices rises. The talk is not lofty, no debates about kings or saints, but the small, tangled threads of gossip that weave a town together. One man mentions a fight outside the tavern earlier. Another speaks of a merchant's daughter rumored to be betrothed. You listen, smiling faintly, because such stories keep you awake better than silence ever could. Laughter breaks out as a younger watchman tells an exaggerated tale of chasing a thief across rooftops. He spreads his arms wide, describing leaps that sound impossible. The others roll their eyes, but the story grows taller with every breath. Quirky detail. He swears the thief escaped by climbing into a chimney, vanishing like smoke. You chuckle, knowing the truth is likely simpler. Perhaps the thief just slipped away in the crowd. Still, the tale sparks laughter, and laughter is precious currency on nights this long. The talk shifts again. Someone mentions a new tax the bailiff plans to collect. Groans ripple through the group, and muttered curses follow. Another man shares news of a traveling peddler who claims to carry relics from distant lands. The conversation loops, tangles, and builds. You sip your broth, adding a quiet comment here and there, content to let the rhythm of voices lull your thoughts. Historians still argue whether such night watches were formal duties enforced by strict law or looser arrangements where townsfolk rotated in and out. Listening to your companions, you suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. Some nights feel like obligation, others like community. Tonight, at least for these minutes, it feels like fellowship. Men bound not by love of the task, but by endurance of it. The fire crackles, sending sparks up the chimney. Someone leans closer, rubbing hands, muttering that the warmth feels like heaven itself. Another complains of boots soaked through, holding them up to steam by the flames. You shift your feet cautiously, wincing as blisters rub against rough socks. The shared misery almost feels comforting. No one here pretends to enjoy the job, but everyone understands it. That shared understanding is its own kind of comfort. The gossip drifts again. A man claims he saw strange lights beyond the fields last night, flickering like fire, but moving too quickly. Another scoffs, suggesting he had too much ale. Still, the story lingers, each man offering his own theory. Travelers' torches, spirits wandering, or perhaps smugglers sneaking goods. You smile faintly. Stories like these grow in the dark, fed by boredom and imagination. They are less about truth than about breaking the monotony. Someone pulls out a crust of bread, passing it around with the generosity of the weary. It is stale, hard enough to chip a tooth, but when softened by dipping into broth, it becomes bearable. You chew slowly, grateful for even this small comfort. The taste mixes with smoke and salt, filling your mouth with something solid after hours of emptiness. The conversation carries on around you, voices overlapping, rising and falling like waves. A joke is told about a pig wandering into the church, and laughter erupts again. You laugh too, though you cannot tell if it is truly funny or if weariness makes anything amusing at this hour. Humor is the salve that keeps the night from swallowing you whole. Without it, the hours would be unbearable. You think of future watchmen, centuries from now, still telling jokes in smoky rooms to fend off sleep. The details will change, but the need for humor never will. Eventually, the fire dies lower, and the men grow quieter. Some rest their heads briefly on arms, others stretch legs stiffly. You know you cannot linger long. Patrol waits, and the town does not sleep without watchers. Still, you savor these moments. The gossip, the laughter, the broth, even the smoke-stained air. They remind you that you are not alone in this long night. You rise slowly, joints aching, staff in hand again. The others nod, murmuring words of encouragement as you head back into the cold. The lantern flares when you lift it, casting its circle of light once more. Outside, the silence closes in, but you carry the warmth of voices with you. The streets feel less empty because you know others walk them too, or sit by fires telling stories. As you resume your steps, you realize gossip itself is a kind of protection. It keeps minds sharp, eyes open, feet weaving. It ties the watch together more firmly than orders from a bailiff ever could. You smile, tapping your staff against the stones, whispering to yourself the fragments of stories you just heard. They will accompany you as surely as the lantern glow. The night stretches still, but you walk lighter now, warmed not only by broth, but by the company you briefly shared. Gossip by the fire, mundane, silly, exaggerated, has done its work. You keep walking, the town sleeping around you, your mind filled with stories that will echo until the next hearth, the next laugh. The next hour passes. The fire's warmth fades behind you as you step back into the cold streets. The silence feels sharper now, each sound more pronounced against the backdrop of frost and shadow. Your lantern swings steadily, its glow cutting small patches from the dark. But beyond that light, the night seems endless. Fatigue tugs at your shoulders, making your steps slower. But suspicion keeps your eyes alert. It is not only thieves or drunks that townsfolk fear in the dark. Superstitions cling to every alley and every gust of wind. You find yourself listening not only for footsteps, but for whispers that might not belong to anyone at all. Superstition is woven into the rhythm of life here. Shadows become spirits. Crossroads become dangerous places. And every creak in a roof beam is a sign of something beyond mere timber. You walk under an eave where a sprig of rowan hangs, tied with red thread. The family inside believes it wards off evil spirits. Next door, another house displays a crude charm carved into the lintel, perhaps to keep witches from crossing the threshold. Historians still argue whether these charms were tolerated as harmless folk practice or condemned by priests as superstition. But for the people who live here, they are as necessary as locks and shutters. Your lantern glow falls on a bundle of herbs dangling in a window. You pause, recognizing dried sage. Its smoke is thought to purify, to drive away illness and wandering souls. The house smells faintly of it, sharp even through the cold night. You imagine the family inside breathing easier, not just from the herb's smoke, but from the comfort of believing themselves protected. Belief itself has weight in this world. It shapes how people face the dark. A shutter creaks suddenly, and you startle before realizing it is only the wind. Still, your mind fills the silence with possibilities. Perhaps it is a spirit rattling the wood, reminding you that the dead walk at night. Such tales spread easily, whispered by firesides, repeated by children to frighten one another. Quirky stories tell of restless souls wandering until prayers or offerings guide them home. You glance once more at the shutter before moving on, half amused, half uneasy. You tap your staff against the ground in steady rhythm, more for reassurance than necessity. The sound grounds you, reminding you that you walk flesh and stone, not dream and shadow. Yet your eyes flick constantly to the corners of your lantern's glow, searching for shapes that might not be there. In the distance, a dog barks once, sharp and lonely, then falls silent. You breathe slowly, steadying yourself. This is the way of the watch, guarding against both real dangers and imagined ones. You pass a crossroads where 3 lanes meet. Here, the stones seem darker, though it may be only your lantern's angle. People say crossroads are places where spirits linger, where witches perform rituals, where bargains with the unseen are struck. You pause briefly, lantern raised, studying the empty space. Nothing moves, nothing stirs, but the weight of belief clings heavier here. You move quickly across, muttering under your breath, though you would not admit it to anyone else. The town is dotted with charms like these, a nail hammered into a doorframe to ward off bad luck, a child's shoe hidden in a wall as protection against witches, a horseshoe nailed above a threshold, its iron thought to repel the supernatural. You glance at each as you pass, not scoffing, but not fully believing either. You know that families rely on these small defenses to feel safe. Without them, perhaps sleep would never come. Historians still argue whether fear of the supernatural was strongest in towns or in the countryside. Some claim rural folk clung harder to old beliefs, while townspeople relied more on the church. But walking these streets, you suspect both are true. Faith in saints blends seamlessly with faith in charms. A prayer whispered at church in daylight is matched by garlic cloves hung in doorways at night. You cannot separate them. Together, they create the net that catches fear. Your lantern flame flickers as the wind rises. You cup it with your hand, watching shadows leap higher along the walls. One shape seems to twitch unnaturally, and you freeze before laughing at yourself. It is only a pile of firewood stacked unevenly. Still, your heart beats faster, proof that superstition is as contagious as cold. You wonder how many other watchmen have quickened their pace past the same pile of wood, unwilling to test whether it is truly lifeless. You step onward, and the sounds of the night return. Rats in the gutter, the far-off call of an owl, the scrape of branches against roof tiles. Each sound could be explained, but each could also be whispered into something else. The scurrying of spirits, the voice of the dead, the hand of a witch scratching at a roof. The imagination is tireless when the night is long. You recall a story told earlier by the fire, a man who swore he saw a ghost wandering by the river, dressed in white, face pale as moonlight. Others scoffed, yet no one walked that way for days after. You shake your head, smiling faintly. The story may be false, but its effect is real. Fear changes behavior, even when the cause is nothing more than rumor. Your lantern glows steadily again as you round another bend. Ahead, you spot another charm nailed to a door, a crudely carved figure, its features worn by weather. You tilt your head, curious. Is it meant to protect or to frighten? You cannot tell, but you know the family inside sleeps easier for having it there. Belief may not banish shadows, but it makes them bearable. The bell tolls in the distance, deep and slow. You pause to count the strokes, relieved to mark another hour gone. The sound pushes back the night's strangeness, reminding you of the tangible. Yet when the last echo fades, the silence feels thicker. You take a deep breath, adjust your cloak, and walk on, staff tapping to anchor your steps. Superstition may never leave these streets. Perhaps it is necessary, a way to make sense of what cannot be controlled. For you, it is another layer of the watch, guarding against shadows, against whispers, against fears that slip through shutters as easily as wind. You keep walking, lantern bright, staff steady, eyes alert. The town sleeps, believing in saints and charms alike. You patrol both, watchmen of stone and of shadow. The night has stretched long, and your body aches with the weight of hours walked. You find yourself approaching the square where the bailiff sometimes appears to check on the watch. The very thought makes your steps more deliberate, staff tapping firmly against the stones, lantern lifted high. The bailiff does not always come, but when he does, it is never quietly. His boots echo like verdicts, and his eyes dart to every corner, as though the shadows themselves are guilty. You remember the first time you saw him arrive during a patrol. He swept into the street with a cloak trimmed in fur, more for show than warmth. His voice carried even before he spoke, the sort of voice that demanded attention rather than earned it. Tonight, you half expect him, because the air feels heavier, as though authority itself is waiting around the corner. Historians still argue whether bailiffs truly ensured safety or merely enforced taxes and order. But from where you stand, their presence is more inspection than protection. Your lantern light falls across the square's stones, slick with frost. You pause in the center, turning slowly, making sure no corner is hidden. It is partly habit, partly performance. If the bailiff sees you idle, he will assume you have been idle all night. The truth of your tired feet matters less than the illusion of vigilance, so you straighten, adjust your cloak, and pace deliberately along the edges of the square. A few shutters creak open above. Someone inside stirs, perhaps awakened by your steps. You picture them peeking down, seeing only a watchman's lantern, and hearing only the tap of wood against stone. For them, that sound is reassurance. For you, it is proof to any authority that you are present, moving, watchful. You smile faintly, 'cause sometimes the job is more about being seen than about seeing. Then, as expected, you hear it. The deliberate tread of boots striking cobblestones. You turn, and there he is. The bailiff steps into the lantern's glow, broad-shouldered, cloak heavy, eyes sharp. He regards you for a long moment, saying nothing, as though silence itself is a test. You bow your head slightly, staff steady, lantern raised. At last he nods, a curt gesture, and speaks in his gravelly voice. "All quiet?" You answer with a simple yes. He studies you, then glances around the square. His gaze lingers on the shadows between houses, as if expecting mischief to leap forth. He mutters about merchants gathering too early by the gate, about townsfolk needing stricter discipline. You nod when appropriate, knowing he seeks not conversation, but acknowledgement. His authority is not softened by fatigue, though you suspect he feels it too. Quirky rumor has it that some bailiffs take bribes from thieves, turning a blind eye in exchange for coins slipped discreetly. Whether true or not, you cannot say, but you know that suspicion runs as deep among watchmen as it does among townsfolk. You chuckle inwardly, wondering if even rats must pay him rent for scurrying freely through the square. The bailiff circles slowly, boots crunching frost, eyes never still. You trail him at a respectful distance, lantern casting longer shadows. He stops near a fountain, frozen solid. its surface gleaming pale in the glow. He scowls at it, though what he expects water to do in this cold you cannot guess. Authority sometimes needs something to frown at, even if it is ice. After another circuit, he turns back to you. "Stay vigilant," he commands, though you never stopped. You bow your head once more, murmuring agreement. He lingers a moment longer, then strides into the night, boots echoing until they fade. The square feels larger without him, quieter, as though the very stones exhale relief. You resume your pacing, slower now, more natural. The lantern swings again, the staff taps, and your breath curls white in the air. The bailiff's presence lingers like a shadow, reminding you that watchmen are watched as much as watchers. The irony is not lost on you. You guard the town, and he guards the image of your guarding. Historians still argue whether medieval authority relied more on fear or respect, but in your bones, you know it is both. You pause near the fountain again, resting a hand on its frozen edge. The ice is smooth, catching the lantern's light. For a moment, you trace a crack with your gloved finger, thinking of how authority is like this. Hard, cold, but brittle in places. One strike could shatter it, but until then, it holds firm. You smile faintly at the thought, then move on. The square is silent once more, but you feel the difference. Where earlier you walked half drowsy, now you walk sharper, shoulders straighter. The bailiff has that effect. Even after he leaves, you continue as though his eyes still follow. Perhaps that is his true power, not his presence, but the way it lingers. You turn down another street, the houses looming close again. The lantern glow catches a carved emblem above a door, perhaps the mark of a guild. You think of how guilds too enforce their rules, their own kind of bailiffs inside workshops and halls. Authority, it seems, is everywhere, from market to monastery, from guild to gatehouse. You are but one small piece in a web of order that stretches across every stone. Yet you cannot help but grin faintly, thinking of the stories told earlier by the fire. The exaggerated thief, the wandering pigs, the charms hung to keep spirits away. Against such tales, the bailiff's sternness feels heavy, almost comical. You wonder if even he tells jokes in private, though you doubt it. Some men live entirely in stone. The bell tolls again, echoing through the town. You stop, listening to its heavy notes, grateful for the sound that marks another hour gone. The bailiff is gone. The merchants wait. The town sleeps. And you remain here, staff steady, lantern glowing. The rhythm continues, and you with it. You draw your cloak tighter, sighing as the cold presses harder. Authority may pass through, but the real endurance is yours. You keep walking, because that is what the night demands. The town dreams of order, and you pace its streets to keep that dream alive. The night drags heavy now, the kind of hour when time itself seems reluctant to move. Your eyes sting, your shoulders sag, and every step feels like lifting lead weights tied to your legs. You keep the staff in rhythm, tapping against stone, not only for duty, but to keep yourself awake. Fatigue has its own cunning. It creeps quietly, whispering that one pause, one lean against a wall, one long blink cannot hurt. You know better. One blink too long becomes sleep, and sleep on watch is unforgivable. The lantern sways, its flame shrinking lower as the tallow burns down. You lift it higher, studying the glow. It casts only a small circle now. The edges dim, the shadows thicker. you feel the weight of the dark pressing harder, a reminder that your body is as tired as the light. The thought tempts you, how easy it would be to lower the lantern, to sit against a wall, to close your eyes. But the bell has not tolled yet, and your duty is not finished. You yawn, the sound echoing too loudly in the quiet street. Your jaw aches from it, and you rub your face with a gloved hand, trying to shake the weariness. You imagine the warmth of your bed, straw mattress uneven, but inviting. The thought of it is almost painful. You picture yourself sinking down, boots off, cloak thrown aside, drifting into sleep so deep, even bells could not wake you. Then you laugh softly, shaking your head. Such daydreams, or night dreams, are dangerous now. Historians still argue whether watchmen were punished harshly for sleeping on duty, or if small lapses were ignored as inevitable. You suspect both are true, depending on the bailiff's mood. Yet stories circulate of men fined, whipped, or dismissed for being caught dozing. Those stories haunt your steps, keeping your eyes wide when they long to close. You pass a narrow lane and stumble slightly, your boot catching on uneven cobblestones. The jolt wakes you, heart thudding, lantern swinging wildly. You mutter under your breath, half cursing, half laughing. Fatigue makes fools of even the most careful watchman. You know this stumble will not be the last before dawn. Your body aches with small pains now. Blisters throb at your heels. Your shoulders ache from the weight of the cloak. Your back protests every time you straighten. Even your hands are sore from gripping the staff too long. You imagine the others at the watch post, some leaning close to the fire, heads nodding in brief dozes. You envy them, though you know your turn at the fire will come only after your circuit is complete. The streets are quieter than ever, the town sunk into its deepest sleep. Even the animals seem still. No pigs root, no dogs bark, no roosters mistake the moon for dawn. It is as if the whole world rests while you alone move through it. The loneliness is sharper than the cold, pressing against your ribs. You sigh, forcing yourself onward. You recall earlier laughter by the fire, the gossip and tales. Those memories warm you faintly, reminding you that fatigue is shared. You whisper one of the jokes under your breath, chuckling softly, even though no one hears. The sound keeps you company, even if it is only your own voice or echoing in the dark. Your lantern sputters again, and you adjust the wick carefully. The flame steadies, though smaller than before. You study the pool of light it casts, and notice how the edges blur now, shadows creeping closer. Every shape looks suspicious. Barrels stacked in an alley, a cart left by the roadside, a doorway slightly ajar. Fatigue twists your vision, making each seem alive. You shake your head, blink hard, and remind yourself they are only objects. But suspicion hums stronger now, sharpened by exhaustion. You lean briefly against a wall, catching your breath. The stone is cold and rough, pressing into your shoulder. You straighten quickly, refusing the temptation to linger. Fatigue is cunning, whispering that rest is harmless. But you know better. Better to keep moving, even if each step feels heavier than the last. You cross a small bridge where water trickles faintly under a thin layer of ice. The lantern's glow glimmers on the frozen surface, fractured reflections but rippling with your steps. You pause, watching the patterns shift, almost hypnotic. The sound of water soothes you, and for a moment you nearly forget the ache in your body. You shake yourself again, muttering that the river will not watch the town for you. Quirky stories come to mind. Tales of watchmen so tired they mistook geese for thieves, or chased their own shadows down streets. You laugh softly, imagining the embarrassment. Perhaps one day, you too will be remembered in a tale of foolishness. The watchman who saluted a scarecrow, or the man who lectured a pig about curfew. Fatigue ensures such stories live on. The bell tolls suddenly, breaking through your haze. You stop, listening, counting each heavy note. Relief floods you. Another hour has passed. The sound steadies you, reminding you that time still moves, even when fatigue convinces you otherwise. You tap your staff in rhythm with the bell, grounding yourself in its cadence. When the final echo fades, you lift your lantern higher and step forward with renewed determination. Historians still argue whether medieval people slept more hours than modern folk, given the lack of artificial light. But you suspect watchmen always slept less. Duty steals hours from rest, and fatigue becomes the unshakable companion of the night. You smile faintly at the thought, half proud, half resigned. Perhaps the true mark of a watchman is not vigilance, but endurance. The lantern glows faintly, the staff taps steadily, and your feet carry you onward. Each step is slower, heavier, but still forward. The streets remain quiet, the houses dark, the town safe. Fatigue gnaws at you, but you push it back with every movement. One more step, one more corner, one more breath. That is the rhythm now. Survival measured in increments. You glance upward as you walk. The stars are fading slightly, hidden by thin clouds, but still they glimmer faintly. You take comfort in them, imagining other eyes far away watching the same sky. Perhaps other watchmen in other towns pace their streets beneath these same stars, fighting the same fatigue. The thought makes you smile, reminding you that even in weariness, you are part of something larger. The lantern flickers lower still, but dawn is not far. You can almost feel it in the air, a faint shift, a promise hidden beyond the horizon. Your body aches, your eyes droop, but you press on. Each step is another victory against sleep, another mark of duty fulfilled. The last hour stretches longer than all the rest, but it is yours to endure. You breathe deeply, steadying yourself. The town sleeps, the shadows linger, and you continue. Fatigue may press harder than any thief or spirit, but you do not yield. Your staff taps, your lantern glows, and your eyes remain open. The watch is not yet done. The streets feel different now. The long hours of cold, silence, and suspicion have thinned, replaced by the faintest sense of change. Your eyes, heavy with fatigue, catch the first hints of light pressing at the horizon. A gray smear, softening the sharp edges of the night. The lantern still burns, though low, its flame no longer the master of shadows, but a companion to a growing dawn. You lift it higher one last time, watching how the glow blends into the early light. The staff taps, slower now, more out of habit than necessity, as though even it knows your shift nears its end. You walk the familiar lanes once more, passing houses that begin to stir. A rooster crows, loud and insistent, breaking the night spell. Dogs bark in response, chains rattling, and the silence you have known for hours begins to fray. Smoke trickles from a chimney, where someone has risen early to stoke embers. The smell of wood and faint bread drifts toward you, sharper than before, as if morning itself carries a new flavor. The market square lies ahead, empty for only a moment longer. Merchants at the gate shift in impatience, carts creaking as animals stamp against the frost. Soon, the gates will swing open, bolts thrown back, and the square will burst alive with shouts, clatter, and color. You smile faintly, knowing you will not be there to see it. Not this morning. Your task is nearly done. You turn once more along the wall, eyes scanning fields where shadows stretch long and pale. The horizon glows faint pink now, frost glimmering silver in the light. You pause, leaning slightly on the staff, and let yourself breathe deeply. The cold still cuts, but the promise of warmth lingers just beyond. Historians still argue whether dawn truly felt like salvation to Watchmen, or if that is only the romantic imagining of later centuries. To you, standing here, it feels like both. Your cloak hangs heavy, wool damp with frost and smoke, shoulders aching under its weight. You tug it tighter anyway, a final gesture of defiance against the night. The lantern flickers weakly, then steadies, stubborn as you. Together you have walked the long hours, and together you reach the close of the shift. You nod at its glow, almost grateful. The town wakes around you in fragments. A door opens, boots scrape, a bucket clangs against stone. A woman calls softly to a child, urging him to rise. A man coughs in the cold air, then spits into the gutter. Each sound is ordinary, yet after the endless hush of night, they seem like music. The rhythm of life returns, brushing aside shadows you have guarded against. You pass another watchman, face pale in dawn's light. His eyes meet yours, tired yet alive, and he nods. No words are needed. The glance itself is enough, a shared acknowledgement that the hours were endured, that the town remained safe. You continue walking, steps lighter, though your legs still ache. The bell tolls again, slower, heavier, but different now. Its sound rolls into daylight, not night. The same notes, yet they feel transformed, no longer commanding the silence of darkness, but welcoming the stir of morning. You pause, letting the sound echo through you, and realize that for the first time in hours, you are smiling without effort. The gatehouse doors groan as they open, bolts clanking, wood straining. Merchants shout, animals bray, wheels creak forward. The world spills into the town, bursting through the walls like a tide. You turn away, lantern low, staff resting against your shoulder. That is no longer your duty. Yours is finished. You walk back toward the post, tired but steady. Your boots scrape frost into slush, leaving prints that glow briefly in the growing light before fading. Behind you, the town shakes off sleep, but before you, only the promise of rest awaits. You think of your straw mattress, uneven and lumpy, yet it calls to you with irresistible comfort. As you approach the watchpost, you glance back once more at the streets. The houses glow faintly in dawn's hue, windows catching pale light. Shadows retreat into corners, but they do not vanish. You know they will return tonight, and so will you, staff and lantern in hand, pacing once more. But for now, the night is over. The duty is done. You step inside, and the world moves on without you. The night has ended, and the watch is complete. You let your breath slow, no longer sharp from cold air, but gentle, deeper, steadier. The staff rests, the lantern dims, and the streets you carried through hours of silence now belong to daylight. All the small sounds you listened for, the whispers of shutters, the creak of timbers, the patter of unseen feet, those are gone now, faded into the ordinary hum of morning life. What felt heavy in darkness dissolves easily beneath the light. You picture the houses filling with warmth again, fires stoked, bread baking, voices rising as children tug at sleeves, and animals call for feed. The town lives as it always has, its rhythm steady, carried forward by bells and markets and simple meals. What you kept safe during the night becomes part of this ordinary day, unnoticed by most, yet preserved because you walked. That knowledge is enough, a quiet reassurance settling on your shoulders as the ache of fatigue softens. Now the horizon glows wider, the air shifting from sharp to soft, and you allow yourself to sink into the comfort of stillness. Your eyes close, lids heavy, but not with dread, only with the ease that comes when duty has been fulfilled. The world does not need your vigilance in this moment. It will carry itself for a time. So breathe slowly, deeply. Let the weight of the night dissolve, each sound fading into quiet, each step melting into rest. Let the light spread gently across your thoughts, lengthening, softening, until the rhythm of wakefulness drifts into the calm of sleep. You are safe. The watch is over, and morning carries you peacefully into rest.